Hey guys, hope you're all doing real well today. My name is Mason, and this is Mason Zero MTG. Today, we're going to be starting episode 6 of going through my cube. So I did the first 5 colors, which are already up on the channel. You can check those out. Today, we're going to look at the multicolored cards. So, yeah, I have 3 cards in each multicolor combination, which is a lot less than I had before. If you haven't been following this, I cut my cube down from 540 to 360. That required a lot of cuts, which was very difficult to do, but I think was a good process to take part in. I think I had 6 or 7, I think 7 actually, multicolored cards in each of the categories, each of the 2 color combinations, and now I have 3. So severely cut down. I think that'll make the cube work a lot better, and I made sure to only keep the most powerful of the cards. So without further ado, let's go on and go through it. Let me know if you like these choices. Check out the link in the description to the Cube Tutor page. Let me know if you think that any other cards will work better. I am willing to listen. I've actually made a lot of changes even since putting these videos out based on all your guys' comments, so I really appreciate that. All right, now let's go. We're going to start off with Joyra of the Gitu. This is the Izzet colors, blue and red. She is a 3-mana 2/2. You can pay 2 and exile a non-land card from your hand. Put 4 time counters on the exiled card. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. I really like this card. It doesn't necessarily fit into an archetype, even though blue-red is kind of like a spells theme, of course. I would say this card can go in any deck, really. It's great for casting expensive things or multiple spells a turn that you want to go off later. A great way to use your mana if you have cards in your hand that you can't cast. You can cast things that would require fixing that you don't have. So really, it's a pretty fun card, and I want to keep it in. We have Saheeli. Izzet Charm. I accidentally took that off. Izzet Charm is a blue and red. For an instant, choose 1, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. Izzet Charm deals 2 damage to target creature, or draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. I used to have all 10 charms from Return to Ravnica block in this cube. Many of them weren't great, I just liked having the whole cycle. In this version, I took apart the cycle and managed to pare it down to just a couple that were particularly good, Izzet Charm being one of those. I think this is versatile and just what blue-red wants to do. It counters spells, it deals damage, it draws cards. This is exactly the card that you would want in a blue-red spells deck, for sure. And then there's a Planeswalker in each 2-color combination. Our blue-red one is Saheeli Rai, 3 mana for 3 loyalty, +1 to scry 1, Saheeli deals 1 damage to each opponent. -2, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. That token gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. And -7, search your library for up to 3 artifact cards with different names, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. This is a great card to have in an artifacts deck, but I think it works okay in a non-artifact deck. That plus and minus, the first ones are fine. She's mostly in here because I do not have another blue-red Planeswalker. I think it'd be cool to have Ral Zarek or Dak Faden. They're probably a bit stronger and more interesting, but I think Saheeli works just fine. Maybe I'll upgrade to one of those someday, but for now, I'm happy with Saheeli. Now we have Boros, our red-white, starting with the red-white Planeswalker that everyone has in their cubes, Ajani Vengeant. 4 mana for 3 loyalty, +1, target permanent doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. -2, Ajani Vengeant deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. And then -7, destroy all lands target player controls. Very powerful card, has a little bit of control, has a little bit of burn. And if you manage to get to that ultimate, you essentially will probably win the game. So a very good card to have, certainly. Assemble the Legion is 5 mana for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a muster counter on Assemble the Legion, then put a 1/1 red and white soldier token with haste onto the battlefield for each muster counter on Assemble the Legion. While this card is pretty expensive mana cost wise, I really like having it. I think it's a great top end for an aggro deck. If you're stalling out, this is a way to really get a lot of creatures onto the board quickly over the course of a few turns. If you're going wide, this can make or break the game, really. So I really like having this card in, even though it's kind of a top end for an aggressive deck. We have, I think, the only other charm that I have in the cube now, which is Boros Charm. 2 mana for an instant, choose one. Boros Charm deals 4 damage to target player, or permanents you control are indestructible this turn, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. This is really the only one of the charms that's worth actual money, and for good reason. Dealing 4 damage to a player can be great in a burn strategy. It can protect all of your permanents from a board wipe, which is amazing. And then giving something double strike could swing a game in your favor if you needed to. Next we have black-green, starting with Vraska the Unseen, 5 mana for 5 loyalty, +1 until your next turn. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to Vraska the Unseen, destroy that creature. -3, destroy target non-land permanent. And -7, put 3 1/1 black assassin creature tokens onto the battlefield with, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. So obviously that ultimate is probably going to win you the game, most likely. But the plus and the minus are perfectly fine. The plus protects Vraska or is a bit of a removal spell. The -3 is straight up just removal. This is a fine card. You'll at least kill something with it and maybe prevent some damage to you if it gets attacked. So a good planeswalker, certainly. Next we have Deathrite Shaman, 1 hybrid green-black for a 1/2 elf shaman. Tap and exile a target land card from a graveyard, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Pay a black and tap, exile a target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, each opponent loses 2 life. And green and tap, exile a target creature card from a graveyard, you gain 2 life. So this is basically just a planeswalker on a creature with those 3 abilities, all very useful. This card is extremely versatile in the fact that, you can splash for one of the colors if you want, since you can cast it for either black or green. And yeah, it's just a really nice utility card to have. It's cheap. It gives you a little extra value, a little extra resources. So a good card for sure. And then we have Putrefy, just 3 mana, destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. It's always good to have removal. Green has pretty bad creature removal. Black beefs it up a bit. So Putrefy is the perfect mix of the 2 colors. Next we have blue-green, starting with Rashmi Eternity's Crafter, a card that I quite enjoy. She's a 2/3. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than the spells, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you don't cast it, put it into your hand. So this card can just get you free spells. Just start off by playing your biggest guy, and then you get a free spell. It's even better with a lot of instants in your deck because it's the first spell you cast each turn, not just on your turn. So if you cast an instant on an opponent's turn, you can potentially cascade into another spell. So Rashmi, very good. Speaking of good cards, we've got Nissa, Steward of Elements. X, a green and a blue for an X loyalty planeswalker. Her +2 is Scry 2. Her 0 is look at the top card of your library. If it's a land or a creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, you may put that card onto the battlefield. -6, untap up to two target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands. Nissa is a crazy planeswalker that scales with the game. That X is very cool. If you can ramp into that with green, then you can have a very large planeswalker. The +2 doesn't do too much, but it sets up your 0. And that 0 can be devastating if you have some massive creature that you reveal off of it. So pairing this with a lot of scries and, just blue cards that rearrange the top of your library, then this card can go absolutely insane. The fact that it's 0 cost to use that second ability is ridiculous if you have enough cards to set it up right. And then Bounty of the Luxa is a card that could help us cast Nissa for a lot. It's a 4-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all flood counters from Bounty of the Luxa. If no counters are removed this way, put a flood counter on Bounty of the Luxa and draw a card. Otherwise, add colorless green-blue to your mana pool. I really like this card because it provides just a little extra value in card draw and extra mana every other turn. So I'm a big fan of this card, especially in the blue-green combination. Next, we have Black-White, starting with Sorin, Solemn Visitor. I really enjoy this Planeswalker. I think it's great for a Black-White aggro deck, which is definitely supported in this cube. So for 4 mana, we have a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. His +1 is until your next turn, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain lifelink. -2, put a 2/2 black vampire creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And -6, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So that plus is great if you're going wide with tokens or something. You can gain a ton of life. The -2 is okay. It definitely protects you, which is always good, but you probably want to be ahead on board when you play this card and immediately plus. I don't think you want to be in a position where you have to use the minus. And then, of course, the -6 is pretty great. Your opponent will have trouble keeping creatures around. Next, we have Hidden Stockpile, a 2-mana enchantment with Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. You can pay 1 and sacrifice a creature to scry 1. This can be a really cool engine. It works with itself to basically pay 1 and scry 1 every turn. If you can get that 1/1 just once, get that chain going, then you can just sacrifice it before your end step again for 1 mana and scry 1. So I like this card. It's cheap, provides some nice value, and if you're playing tokens, you can just keep scrying if you want to. Our last Black-White card is Kambal, Consul of Allocation, 3 mana for a 2/3. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This is a great answer to control decks. Since it's just one-sided, you could really put it in any Black-White deck. There are a lot of spells, certainly, so putting it in a deck might not be the worst. A 4-point life swing is pretty big. It turns off a lot of blue decks that just try to cantrip and play a lot of filtering spells and stuff like that, so it'll really make those players hesitate to cast their draw spells. Now we're into the ally colors, starting with green-white. We have a Johnny Unyielding, 6 mana for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. His +2 is reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put all non-land permanent cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. -2, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. And -9, put 5 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, and 5 loyalty counters on each other Planeswalker you control. So the +2, it's good, essentially card draw. You could draw up to 3 cards, which is pretty great. His -2 is straight up removal, gets past indestructible creatures, so that's really nice. The -9 is great if you are ahead. Unfortunately, it does not win the game on its own like some other Planeswalkers. It does require you to have a pretty decent board state of creatures or Planeswalkers, but if you do, you're probably already winning, and this will help you win more. So chances are you're going to go between the plus and the -2, just for some utility, but I'm a big fan of this card, and I think that it goes well in the cube. Okay, so we have Selesnya Charm. I guess I did keep one other charm. It's an instant, choose one, target creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn, or exile target creature with power 5 or greater, or put a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance onto the battlefield. I do like this charm. All of its modes I think are just fine. The first one, some creatures that may be large but don't have trample, so that can give it trample and an extra buff. Mainly in here for the exiling a creature. Removal is great, and that's pretty decent removal, especially since it exiles. Putting a knight onto the battlefield can be nice as a surprise blocker or something, but probably not the mode you'll be choosing most times. Dramoka's Command is a green and a white for an instant. Choose 2. Prevent all damage target instant or sorcery spell would deal this turn, or target player sacrifices an enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Now when this card was in standard, it was usually +1/+1 counter and then fight is what would get chosen. Chances are that's how this card will get used in this format as well. Sacrificing an enchantment may become relevant since there are a fair amount of powerful ones. I doubt that preventing damage from an instant or sorcery would be very popular unless someone's burning you out and you're about to die. But in general, this is going to be a fight card, I think. Now on to blue-white. Our Planeswalker is Narset Transcendent. For 4 mana, you get a 6 loyalty Planeswalker. +1, look at the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. -2, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell from your hand, this turn, it gains Rebound. And -9, you get an emblem with your opponents can't cast non-creature spells. First of all, this is a great Planeswalker because it's 4 mana for 6 loyalty. That kind of rate you don't get very often. The downside, of course, is that she doesn't necessarily do much, and she doesn't protect herself, so you need that loyalty. Her plus is decent card draw, but, it might be a waste. You don't even get to scry it. It's really not very good. It'd be better to have other scry triggers and other effects to fill through the top of your library, but that -2 can be very nice. Giving a spell Rebound, especially if it's something very impactful, that can help shift a game in your favor. And then a -9, of course, against a mirror match against another control deck or something, that's just going to stop your opponent from being able to play their deck. But you might not get there because the plus is just not very good. Next we have Reflector Mage. Previous standard all-star before being banned and now rotated out, of course. 3 mana for a 2/3. When Reflector Mage enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. I really like this card as a piece in a control deck. It sets your opponent back a turn and you basically time walk them. It's a good effect. Not being able to cast the spell, again, just pushes it over the top over other return to hand cards. And then we have Dragonlord Ojutai, 5 mana for a 5/4 with flying. Dragonlord Ojutai has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and whenever Dragonlord Ojutai deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So Anticipate, which is also in the cube in blue. So this card is fantastic. It protects itself in a lot of cases, it draws you cards, and it's a big flyer. It's a great creature that'll win you the game for a control deck or something. I've always loved this card. I think that it fits well into the cube. Giving it Vigilance, of course, will just make him extremely hard to deal with. We're in blue-black now. Starting off with Baleful Strix, a 1/1 for 2 artifact creature with flying and death touch. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. This is just a generically good card. A 1/1 flying death touch can trade up very well, and the fact that it replaces itself is also nice. It's a lot of value for 2 mana. And being an artifact is relevant, as you'll see here with Tezzeret the Schemer, who cares about artifacts. He is a 5 loyalty planeswalker for 4 mana. His +1, create a colorless artifact token named Ethereum Cell that has tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. -2, target creature gets +X -X until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. And then -7, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 5/5. So not the most insane planeswalker, but pretty solid in an artifact deck. The +1 is just ramp. The -2 can be pretty decent removal, which unfortunately does require some setup, but I think there's pretty good support for an artifact deck. And the -7 will just help you win the game. It's notable that those 5/5s don't go away at end of turn. They just stay creatures. So pretty decent planeswalker in the right shell. Sire of Stagnation is our last blue-black card. It is an Eldrazi, costs 6 mana for a 5/7. It has Devoid, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player exiles the top 2 cards of his or her library, and you draw 2 cards. This guy is pretty big, which is good on its own, certainly. Top end for a blue-black deck, I think it's great. Drawing 2 cards if your opponent plays a land is nice. If they're behind or if they're trying to ramp with ramp spells and try to get lands, this card can just start wrecking them. The exiling isn't really relevant unless you have some way to manipulate the top of their library, but probably not. But drawing 2 cards is excellent. Next, into red-green, starting off with Sarkhan Vol. Quick note on this one, I actually opened this in a Chaos draft recently. It's foil Sarkhan, so that was cool. So he went straight in the cube, replacing Domri Raid. I think they're both quite good planeswalkers. I think Sarkhan is just a little bit better than Domri in this case, but honestly, they're both very good for a situation like this. So he's 4 mana for 4 loyalty. +1, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. -2, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. And -6, put 5 4/4 red dragon creature tokens with flying into play. So a lot of powerful effects, especially if you have creatures. That +1 obviously is nice. And the -2, being able to steal something, can be incredible. Stealing your opponent's biggest creature can really swing the game. Even if you just use him for that, he can be kind of worth it. That effect is usually worth 3 mana. And then you just tack on the extra green for a fog when your opponent attacks Sarkhan next turn. So, I think it's a great card for 4 mana. Bloodbraid Elf, 4 mana for a 3/2 with haste and Cascade. This card is, of course, widely considered to be good. Having Cascade is nice. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less than this spell, and then you get to play it. So I think, this is generally considered to be one of the better Cascaders, and I think that it's a great way to get free spells, especially in this color combination where spells are often kind of big. Ulrich of the Kralin Horde, 5 mana for a 4/4. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into Ulrich of the Kralin Horde, target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. At the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Ulrich. And then he transforms into Ulrich Uncontested Alpha, a 6/6. Whenever this creature transforms into Ulrich Uncontested Alpha, you may have it fight target non-werewolf creature you don't control. At the beginning of each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells last turn, transform Ulrich. So not the craziest card, but certainly a fun one. I am a fan of transforming cards. I think this one can win you the game, potentially, since it gives a big buff. It fights creatures on the other end. It can really swing the game in your favor. Next, we have one of the uncards that I added. I believe this is the last one. I only put 3 in total. Grusilda Monster Masher. 5 mana for a 4/4. Combined, enchanted, and equipped creatures you control have menace. Pay 5 and tap. Put 2 target creature cards from graveyards onto the battlefield combined into 1 creature under your control. I really like the design of this card. First of all, the fact that if you combine a creature, it has menace. That's great. But also, if you enchant or equip something, it also has menace. That's just a nice little upside. There's not too much equipping and enchanting in this cube, but it's a corner case, but it could happen. I think combining things, basically melding them together, is a great mechanic. Also love that it doesn't have to be from your graveyard. It can be from anyone's graveyard. You can take your most powerful creature and your opponent's most powerful creature and combine them together into some super beast. So, big fan of this card. I don't think that it necessarily breaks the cube. I think it works really well. Next, we have Daretti Ingenious Iconoclast, the black-red planeswalker, 3 mana for 3 loyalty. +1, put a 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature token with Defender onto the battlefield. -1, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, destroy target artifact or creature. -6, choose target artifact card in a graveyard or artifact on the battlefield. Put 3 tokens that are copies of it onto the battlefield. I like this card. Black and red are, kind of artifact colors in the cube, sort of black, red, blue. You can make artifacts work. The +1 is fine. It protects himself. It's nice that it's a plus that protects himself. Also synergizes very well with his minus. You can sacrifice the token that you make if you want to destroy something else. And the -6 is great. It's a great payoff if you make a good artifacts deck and manage to get some crazy stuff like Mirror Battlesphere or Blightsteel Colossus, things like that. I like Duretti quite a bit. The fact that he's 3 mana for 3 loyalty is also nice. He comes down pretty early. Our last one is Unlicensed Disintegration. 3 mana for an instant, destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. Again, kind of the artifact colors. I think this is a great removal/burn spell. The only competition for this one would definitely be... oh wow, I can't remember the name of the card, but you probably know what I'm talking about. The 1 red, 1 black to destroy a creature. It can't be regenerated. I don't know why the name is escaping me, but that would be the other option in this slot. I figure they both do the same thing, and for 1 more mana, you can most likely deal 3 damage to the creature's controller. I think that extra 1 mana is worth it and worth playing this card over that one. Next we have some 3-colored cards. For each of the 5 wedges and 5 shards, we have 1 card. These I'm pretty flexible with for the most part. I know there's more powerful cards for some of these color combinations. Our first one is Ankle Shanker. It's 5 mana, including red, white, and black for a 2/2. Has haste, and whenever it attacks creatures you control, gain first strike and death touch until end of turn. I really like this card as the top end to an aggro deck. First strike and death touch is such a crazy combination that essentially means your creatures are immune to combat damage. Most things aren't going to survive that. They're just going to die instantaneously. So it's either a one-sided board wipe or you get through with a bunch of damage. And it's every time it attacks, not just when it enters the battlefield. So big fan of this card in aggro decks. Next we have Sphinx of the Steel Wind. It is 8 mana, including white, blue, and black for a 6/6 artifact creature. Has flying, first strike, vigilance, lifelink, protection from red and from green. This card is absolutely insane, which is why it has such a high mana cost. It has so many abilities. Protection is great as well. This card is just going to do a lot of work if you manage to cast it. I love it. So, I used to have Cruel Ultimatum in this slot, but your guys' comments on my blue video really convinced me otherwise, referring to Arcane Savant being able to cast Cruel Ultimatum, which did happen in the cube video that I did, in which we played the cube. People were saying that that's probably a little too broken. I think they totally are right. Any game that you manage to cast that, you will win. Put in some filtering and you'll find the combo, I'm sure. So instead, I took out Cruel Ultimatum just to avoid that conflict altogether and tried to find another Grixis colored card. Ended up with Marchesa the Black Rose. 4 mana, including blue, black, and red for a 3/3 with Dethrone. Other creatures you control have Dethrone. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. I may have to look into supporting this card a bit more. There's not a ton of +1/+1 counters, especially in these colors. Dethrone might be relevant. Certainly, that might be good enough to sort of be a machine on its own. Overall, I do like this card a lot. I'm only worried that there isn't going to be enough built-in synergy necessarily, but I completely understand the concerns about Cruel Ultimatum with Arcane Savant. So I listened, and I think the cube is better for it. In green, red, white, we have Mael the Anima, a 3 mana 2/3. You can pay 3 red, green, white, and tap her to look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature card with power 5 or greater from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is a great way to cheat out some insane creature on turn 6. It may require a little bit of filtering, potentially. If you built your deck with a lot of high mana cost stuff and a lot of ramp, then I think that's the best way for this to pay off. there are some creatures with, high power, especially in green. So this could be a way to completely swing the game if you manage to cast her. In Abzan colors, we have Siege Rhino, 4 mana, including white, black, and green, for a 4/5. Has Trample. When Siege Rhino enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life. I'm sure you are all familiar with Siege Rhino, widely played, and I think is a great card for Cube as well. Can really swing things with that life total, and it's just a big body with a Trample. So, big fan of this card for this color combination. Surek Dragonclaw, 5 mana, including green, blue, and red, for a 6/6 with Flash. He can't be countered. Creature spells you control can't be countered. Other creatures you control have Trample. This is just a crazy card for a creature-based deck. Makes your deck really good against control as they're trying to counter your creatures. And in addition to that, any big guys you have that don't have Trample now have Trample. So I really like having this card for a big stompy deck like that. The blue is a little weird, since mostly green-red is going to be what you're doing, but you never know what you could find in blue. Narset Enlightened Master is 6 mana, including red, white, and blue, for a 3/2 with First Strike and Hexproof. Whenever Narset attacks, exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-creature cards exiled with Narset this turn without paying their mana costs. This card can get insane. I used to have a Narset Commander deck. I took it apart because it was too oppressive, and it just wasn't fun to play because there was always too much going on. I would just forget triggers because there were a million of them. But very fun card. I think Cube is a good place for it if you manage to build your deck well. I think you can just go crazy if you make a mostly spells-based deck and try to get this card out as soon as possible. Sultai Ascendancy is a black, green, and blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard, and put the rest back on top of your library in any order. I chose this card. It's not very powerful, but I think it really embodies what this color combination is trying to do in the cube. These are the colors of the graveyard, and just a relatively cheap way to continuously be putting cards into the graveyard every turn. I think is really valuable. So if you're in this color combination, this is a card you want to pick up. Next we have Tamiyo, Field Researcher, in Bant colors. So 4 mana, including green, white, and blue, for 4 loyalty. Her +1 is choose up to 2 target creatures until your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you may draw a card. -2, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. And -7, draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with, you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana costs. So the +1 and the -2 are both very good. If you're being aggressive or even defensive, you can draw some cards with that. With the -2, you get to play the control game. And then, of course, the -7, you basically win the game because you have Omniscience, which is a very, very good Magic card. So Tamiyo is just all around kind of useful. She does a lot of stuff. Being in 3 colors, there's a lot of room for her abilities in those different aspects. So if you get to play Tamiyo, you're going to have a fun time. Our last card now is Broodmate Dragon. It's 6 mana, including black, green, and red, for a 4/4 with flying. When Broodmate Dragon enters the battlefield, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So I like this card because for 6 mana, you get 8 power and toughness spread across 2 bodies. I think it's a nice card to have. It's a big, stompy, aggressive card. I think it'll do work if you get it, if you're in this combination, and you'd be happy to have it. So guys, those are my multicolored cards between both 2-color and 3-color. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Again, like I said before, let me know if there are any cards in here that you think I should take out and replace with something else. Especially with multicolor, there's a lot of powerful cards out there because they get to combine a lot of things and sort of stretch the power level by these mana costs that are a little more restrictive. So there's a lot of options out there. Keep in mind that my cube is relatively budget, so preferably cards that are under $10 is good. That's mostly what I'm going to be looking at. So yeah, definitely let me know if there's anything you want to be in here. Tomorrow will be the artifacts and land section. I'm not sure if I will have those together or split up. I don't have a ton of artifacts, so I'll probably do them together. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope I'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below. I will see you all tomorrow.